Welcome back, guys. In this issue of our shore fishing conditions series, we will be discussing types of tide and how to use them to your advantage. We'll begin by providing you with a quick basic intro into the main phases of each tide. We'll then quickly discuss how often tides can typically occur within each 24-hour period. We'll then talk about tide calendars and how to read them. From here, we'll cover what rising tides are. We'll also cover falling tides and how you can use both types of tide to make your trips more effective. So let's first, very quickly, give a basic explanation of the main phases of the tide. At sea fishing venues all around the world, there are regular states of tide that occur in phases. The two most distinctive states of tide are high tide, when the water level is at its highest, and low tide, when it's at its lowest. As the water is highest at high tide, this is the period where the largest amount of any beach will be covered. The opposite, of course, applies to low tide, when the largest amount of the beach will be exposed. The period from the low tide to high, as the tide comes in, is known as the flood tide. The period from the high tide to the low, as the tide goes out, is known as the ebb tide. So how often can we expect tides to occur? Take a look at this tide graph. At the top, we can see that we have entries for each day. For the first entry, the tide readings are split for the first half of the day and the second. We can see here that during this whole calendar day there are 2 high tide periods and 2 low tide periods. This is also true of all the other days shown here. For the entire UK and the majority of the European coastline, we have what are known as semi-diurnal tides. All it means is, typically, we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides of equal size in any 24-hour period. For areas in Europe such as southern France, the Adriatic Sea and western Turkey, they have what are known as mixed semi-diurnal tides, but we'll cover that in another video. So how do the tide cycles work for most of the UK and Europe? There is typically an approximate gap of around 7 days between the lowest size tides and the highest size tides for any 14-day period. This 7-day gap also applies for the tides between the highest size tide and the lowest size tide. The highest tide during any of these 7-day periods is known as a spring tide, whereas the lowest tide during these 7-day periods is known as a neap tide. The average tide sizes for each of these periods vary, cycle to cycle, all year around. The larger the size of a tide, the higher the high tide level will be compared to other tides. Also, the low tides of any large tide will be lower. So you can see that there is greater tidal range between high and low for larger sized tides. For smaller sized tides, the opposite is true. High tides won't be as high compared to other tides, and low tides won't be as low compared to other tides. So you can see that smaller tides have less of a tidal range between low and high. So which are the best tides to fish? Let's start with the rising tides. Rising tides are the tides that are gradually increasing in size from the most recent neap up towards the next spring tide. Generally speaking, for many venues and for many species, the last run of rising tides approaching the next spring tide are typically considered to be the most potentially productive tides to fish. One of the main reasons why larger rising tides can be preferable is that they promote inshore movement of marine life. Microplants and creatures like plankton and krill get carried inshore by these tides, along with the bait fish and larger fish that follow. Another main reason is that larger rising tides not only reach more areas to dislodge food, they also allow fish to access intertidal areas closer to shore, allowing them to feed more confidently in food-rich areas that would otherwise be off-limits due to the water depth. In addition to this, larger currents occur with bigger tides, which can also dislodge more food from the seabed more effectively. As ever in fishing, there are exceptions. When it comes to tides, it's also best to take into account what venue you are fishing, as well as which species you're looking to target, as both of these factors will be dependent when it comes to tide. This channel provides a playlist of videos on how to target many specific species. We'll be sure to provide links at the end of the video. Which leads us neatly onto our final section. How do falling tides fit in when fishing effectively? Falling tides are the tides dropping in size, falling from the most recent spring down to the next neap tide. Smaller tides falling down to the lowest neap tide can actually be better to fish if you are fishing a venue with very strong currents. The reason for this is that you may struggle to keep your bait in the area that you have cast to, as it is carried away off and down beach and closer inshore. This will also make bite indication harder. Also, during times of stronger currents and rising tides, seaweed floating in the water can be more of an issue and prevent you fishing effectively. So falling tides towards a neap can actually be the way to go on some venues. Make sure to speak to anglers who have fished a venue before, or try to do some research before you visit to find out if a certain venue has stronger tides. Hi guys, just a quick reminder. If you like my videos and find that you are learning some useful tips, please do remember to click the subscribe button just under this video. Subscribing is completely free. There's no sign-up process as it's all done at the click of a button. Also do remember to hit the like button if you find a specific video interesting and helpful. Doing these things really does help support the channel and allows me to keep making more and more helpful videos that will hopefully make your sessions that much more enjoyable. Thanks so much guys. If you are interested in learning how to target specific species, or you would like to find further information on using conditions to your advantage, feel free to click the channel name below this video to browse our channel page. Alternatively, you can also click on one of the links provided now. This includes a video on water temperature, which includes one of the lesser known effects of tide. Thanks again for watching. Until next time.